What's up, hackers? Welcome to Saturday Hacker Day. My name is Taggart, and today, as usual, we're going to be doing some blue team stuff. But before we get started, we just have one piece of cyber news. We talked about it on Tuesday, but for the Saturday gang, I wanted to talk about it from the defensive standpoint, and that is the latest. I struggle to call it a 0-day because it's not really, but the latest ADCS Active Directory vulnerability that's been disclosed. This is CVE 2022 26923, and there's been Oliver Lyack has done an absolutely fantastic job writing up this vulnerability and explaining the details of Active Directory certificate services attacks. And this is following on prior work from Will Schroeder and a few other folks. And so basically follow the links that you see in this write-up to learn everything possible about ADCS and the potential attack vectors therein. If you are responsible in any way, shape, or form for a Windows Active Directory environment, this is something that you need to know about, because out of the box, Active Directory is vulnerable to these attacks. And in many cases, these are things that Microsoft will not fix because they believe that they are features, not bugs. Now, this one in particular, this CVE 2022-26923 has been patched as of this last patch Tuesday. However, the patch has impacted authentication by Radius, PEEP, EAP, and a few other things, I think, as well, especially because of the way that it handles authentication for machine accounts in Active Directory. If you're not super familiar with how Active Directory works, which, by the way, I wouldn't count myself as an expert on this in any way, I've just been deep in this for the last week. First of all, computers have their own accounts inside of Active Directory, and they also have their own credentials inside of Active Directory. And so when machines join a domain or when they connect to a network, they may in fact use this authentication pipeline that relies on certificates that are issued by certificate authorities inside of the domain. It might be your domain controller, it might not. But regardless of how that's set up, this patch may have impacted the way that certain services authenticate using certificates. So just be aware of that. And more importantly, take a look at this write-up and the other linked write-ups, because you may find that your environment is vulnerable to some of these attack paths, even though it's not like a 0-day, right? It's just a way that Active Directory is configured that makes your environment vulnerable to certificate spoofing. And what's the solution? Well, there are a number of different attack vectors, so there's no one clear-cut solution, but I will tell you what the big fix is. If you can make it happen. This is a little bit tricky, but if you can make it happen, what you want to do is reduce the MSDS machine account quota value, which is in the Active Directory schema. You want to reduce that to 0, which determines how many machine accounts a given user can enroll. Now, what that means is that you have to have a domain administrator, basically, or some other authorized party enroll machines into the domain. You can't just like have a regular user join their computer to a domain. So it's a little bit harder from an administrative standpoint, but what it prevents is any old user from being able to join their computer to a domain and thereby get special permissions over that machine account which they have created. So that is the start of a lot of these attack paths, and that's the way that you prevent it, by reducing the machine account quota, which is by default 10, to 0. And that is all explained in the write-up that I have just linked. All right, with that out of the way, so Killer, this CVE was a reintroduction of an earlier one, but it uses the same attack path, right? It's still SAM account, it's still machine account spoofing. So that is true that this was a reintroduction of an earlier vulnerability, but the remediation remains the same, because in both cases it was machine account spoofing. And several other vulnerabilities that aren't even really explicitly listed as CVEs also rely on machine account spoofing. Okay, so what we're going to do today is we're going to go full blue team, full IT ops. What we're going to do is we're going to set up our security baseline in the lab. What does that mean? So we talk a lot about threat hunting. My day job is threat hunting, and I love being in the sort of advanced level of looking for threats, the threats that basic stuff isn't going to catch. In order for me to be able to do that job, I need to trust that the basic stuff is handled. And a lot of it can be automated, but a lot of it also can be set up to be clean and easy to use. When you're building a security architecture from scratch, you want to make sure that that stuff is caught. And so we're going to talk about some ways you can do it with open source technologies today inside of our lab. Goose, thank you so much for the congratulations. Yes, yes, recent news. I have been promoted from analyst to senior cybersecurity researcher at my organization. So what that essentially means is that I get to do more of that threat emulation and threat hunting, looking for threats before they happen, and getting to do some really advanced work in the healthcare sector. So stuff that we haven't always had space and time to do before. For example, research on medical devices, stuff like that. So I'm pretty excited about what we're going to get to do with that. But for today, let's establish our security baseline. And so the kinds of services that we're talking about here are IDS and IPS. So those of you who are studying for the Sec Plus or the CISA or whatever, IDS and IPS. I'm wondering if someone in chat can give a good breakdown of the difference between IDS and IPS, intrusion detection systems and intrusion protection systems. What's the difference? While I check our SOC to make sure that everything's looking good here. I've spun everything up, and I've created a new server for some of the services that we'll be deploying today. One tries to prevent breaches, the other detects breaches. So in both cases, the breach has already happened, Czar, because generally speaking, IDS and IPS run internally in an environment. That being said, because otherwise you're talking about a firewall, right? So what's the distinction between a firewall and an intrusion prevention system? An intrusion prevention system has the ability to take blocking action on traffic that is deemed malicious, whereas an intrusion detection system has the ability to simply alert on that activity. So we're going to talk a little bit about both of those today. All right, awesome. Got our agent going here. Oh, I need to do sudo ctl daemon reload. Do system ctl enable Waza agent and start the Waza service. Awesome. I am just deploying a new server for one of the services we're going to be deploying today, and I'm connecting it to our Waza environment because we're going to take advantage of Waza to collect some of the logging that it will generate. Perfect. That's what you want to see. All right. These two are disconnected. That's fine. I don't care about that. But we do have our Windows stuff up, and we do have the Suricata, which we'll be talking about in just a second. But let's begin at the edge of the network, where we interface with the whole wide world. And we have a firewall. We know we have a firewall called pfSense. It's open source, it's BSD based, and by default, out of the box, it doesn't do, crazy security stuff. It has firewall capabilities, but it's not doing any sort of like next gen firewall stuff. So how do you make that happen? It turns out there is, for one, a package called pfBlocker, And pfBlockerNG is a package that you can deploy onto your pfSense firewall that adds some of these capabilities into pfSense. So we're going to get at what OSI level is this firewall work at? This is a layer 3 firewall, right? It's aware of IPs. It's aware of, and it can be aware, yeah, it's aware of IPs. It's not aware of domains or anything like that until we add this capability in here. Because we're going to do some DNS blocking as well. So pfBlockerNG goes up essentially to, if we're talking about DNS, you're talking about application layer. So that's layer 7. All right, so, hey, Prax. Yeah, so to install pfBlockerNG, you might worry, especially looking at documentation like this, like, oh, this is going to be a hassle. System. Package manager. Available packages. There it is. It's actually not that difficult to deploy this thing. So we're going to fire this off. We're going to install this right here. Goes and grabs the packages. It gives us a nice little update. I have to say, I know that there's a fork of pfSense, and I haven't played with it. I know I'm supposed to. But I really, really respect the pfSense project. It is, for an open source firewall, I mean, what more could you want, honestly? Okay. So pfBlockerNG is installed. And so now that it is installed, how do we start using it? If we go to firewall, there should be pfBlockerNG. This fills me with joy that it's just so easy to get these features into your firewall, and it costs nothing to make this happen. This is why, you know, if you're looking at, I've had a lot of conversations this last week about, you know, enterprise security versus non-enterprise security, and like how Microsoft decisions impact big enterprises, or what decisions they make based on big enterprises versus everybody else. And I want to say that I think that there's a different calculus to what kind of software you should pay for and deploy, depending on the size of your organization and the talent that you can attract, certainly. But I do think something to think about as a business owner equals, or something to think about as a business owner, is how much you're spending in operational expenses versus how much you're spending in capital expenditures. And what do I mean by that? If you're not familiar with budgetary stuff, let's break this down basically. Capital expenses are things that add material value to your organization, right? Meaning that if we were to do an inventory of all of the assets that are owned by a company, that thing that you've purchased adds to the appraisal of your gross worth, right? In terms of assets. Those things are handled differently from a tax perspective than operational expenses, which is the money that you spend to make things work. Why does this matter? Buying a bare metal server, right, or standing up a data center is a capital expense, because you're adding material value in assets to your business. Paying money for Azure or any other cloud services is an operational expense. And so what you're doing is you're changing up the tax, at least in the United States, you're changing up the tax implications for your business. And also, not for nothing, you're hooking yourself into a subscription forever, right? And that I don't think should be taken lightly. Is that a better choice than spending a little bit of money on hardware and deploying an open source solution, maybe on-prem, maybe in a data center, whatever it is, but like owning a little bit more? I'm not arguing for going back to all on-prem services. Certainly not. I'm just saying that what we're seeing a move to across the board is much more operational expenditure and much less capital expenditure in IT. What that means is that there's no value being added. It's a total cost center for the organization. That's always been true for security, but with open source options, you can change that up a little bit, because you can deploy things like this with relative ease, and invest in other things like personnel. Okay, rant over. Let's start looking at this. So Maximind, we're not gonna, so interface configuration rules. We're gonna do isolation block, good. LAN, we're gonna block, that's foot, good. That's inbound. Prax asks, what does NG mean in aircrack, pfBlocker, etc. NG? Next gen. It means the same thing as in Star Trek TNG. All right, looks good here. Let's take a look at some of our IP4. So we can just add lists here, but I believe we should have the ability to add custom lists. What I want to try to do is something similar to what we did with OpenCTI, which, by the way, if you missed last week's stream on OpenCTI, go back and check it out. It's pretty cool. And by the way, it's still purring. It's working great. Do I mind bumping up the text a notch? I mean, which text, man? I'll zoom in the firewall a little bit. Yeah. Okay, so OpenCTI is actually humming along. It only has a single connector for us right now, which is Alien Vault. But even with that, look at the data that we have coming in. We have a couple of nice reports, and we have plenty of observables coming in. Lots of great stuff here. Let's go to observations. I should probably relog in. Oh, by the way, Honeypots, thank you so much for the resub and 4 months of subscription. And Luffy, thank you for the follow. Let's go to threats and entities, really, is what I want, right? Or arsenal. These are tools. Data. I'm still learning how to navigate this thing. If I go to our main dashboard here, yeah, I should be able to get quickly to observables. That's investigations. That's custom dashboards. That's data import. I think I just need to make features hyper navigation, hyper login. I'm just looking for my list of IPs here. or domains. I just want to see my atomics. But they're all connected, right? These are all activities that we would have undertaken, or reports, right? Yeah. Let's go to indicators. There we go. Here are our indicators. So observations and then indicators. So here we have domains, hashes. We can filter, of course, by type if we want to. If we want to just look at any IPs that are coming in. Or not. Domain name? Why am I not filtering by this? What kind of a thing is this? It says pattern type sticks. But what kind of, so observable type then? I want to see. Yeah. There we go. No, it's there. It's just about how we're filtering it and looking at it. Observations, observables. Label, no label. Get rid of that. Okay, so if we do domain name one more time, or I want to try IP address. Data tab up top in the details view. Yanner, you're a little slow. I think I'm on screens later than where you are at. So no, it says type URL. So if I do URL, what do you got for me? There it is. There we go. We were just using the wrong thing to filter. Right? And then here for the file hashes, it just says file. We wanted to look for hashes. So they weren't domain names, they were URLs that we're getting. Yeah. So we have this coming in. We were filtering by the wrong types. And host name rather than domain name. Right? If we wanted to just look at those raw. See? We have them. Okay, cool. Now, the point I was trying to make, though, is that OpenCTI is purring, even with a single connector to Alien Vault. What else do we want to do with that? Well, I want to be able to get some of that intelligence also available to my firewall, so that if automatically that kind of data comes in, it's blocked. So how do we make that happen? Oh, hello, Theo, and hello, Raiders. Welcome, friends. We are setting up some security baselines with an IPS on our pfSense firewall, and then later we'll set up a detection system with Suricata. That is the plan for today. Okay. Click on pfBlockerNG to start the configuration wizard. Well, it turns out there wasn't one. Hey, Al. Thanks for the subscription for 6 months. Good to see you. This is Blue Team, yeah. All right. So here's what our default settings look like. And everything looks all right here. But what I want to do now is connect data lists. So enable the IPv4 feed on pfBlocker. The PRI feed has a fairly broad coverage, but is designed to avoid false positives. Okay, so to view the list of available feeds on pfBlockerNG, navigate to Firewall, pfBlockerNG, and Feeds. Firewall, pfBlockerNG. I was just there. I can't help but notice I don't see feeds. What is this music? All right, let's switch it up. There we go. I love it when the documentation doesn't match what's actually happening here. Unless I was supposed to install the developer component as well. Right, because if we go back to package installation, it said click install on the version with devel at the end of the package. Oh, okay. So I should have used the devel. All right. Well, let's go back to our package manager then. Would have helped to read. All right. Let's remove pfBlockerNG. And then we'll reinstall pfBlockerNG devel. Meanwhile, how was everybody's week? Chad, thank you so much for the gift sub to Theo. Appreciate that, sir. And 30 subs gifted in the channel. You generous maniac. All right, let's try this again. Prax went to... you went to your first CyberSec conference. Well, congratulations. I hope you had a fantastic time. Sounds like you did. Here we go. pfBlockerNG. Devel. Orbital not to be outdone. Gifting a sub to Mr. Mochi. Thank you. Killer did some great crypto hack challenges. And started to learn some ECPPT. Now, interestingly, BOF means two different things, right? It could mean buffer overflow or beacon object file. I think you mean buffer overflow in this case, right? Ah, good. Then we have devel. Now let's go back to Firewall and pfBlockerNG and see if things look a little bit different. Ah, now we're seeing the wizard that we were supposed to see in the first place. Yeah, my big news is that I got new glasses, which have these like really hardcore like blue shields on them. So it's been great for my eyes, but if you see a little bit more glare on my eyes, I apologize about that. And oh yeah, the resolution improvement is significant. Plus they're half rims, which means that my slow transition to being like a mission control technician in the 60s era of NASA is progressing. I have to start dressing in white short sleeve collar tees and very thin ties. All right, let's go through the wizard here. Mustache when? I had a beard for a while, and it was universally reviled by people who care, so... I hear the buffer overflows on TryHackMe are great. Yeah, specifically Tibbs, right? Tiberius's room for buffer overflows are phenomenal. Just a mustache, go classic NASA. No, I am confident that the wife will veto that plan. Okay, the inbound firewall interface is the WAN, so that's good. And then the outbound firewall interface that we're going to watch is isolation. Oh, you're doing the guy in you're doing the nightmare stuff, Killer? The guy in a tuxedo class? I'm doing that stuff too. It is good as long as you have the basics down. I do feel like a little bit more work could have been done on the instructional design of that course. The materials are solid, but having some additional supporting material is going to be helpful for that. Imagine having a wife in the year of our Lord 2022. Al, I'm here to tell you, being married slaps. It's great. I love it a lot. Okay, so let's see. DNS block list web server configuration, VIP. This is interesting. 10.10.10.1. All right, we'll do that. But what about all the hair clips around the house? Stop making fun of my wife. She's fantastic. I am not held hostage in any way, shape, or form. Okay. 8081, 8443. The VIP looks okay, because that's not going to interface with anything that we're doing. Does the VIP need to be on? Let's go through the initial configuration. Yeah, we'll leave that alone. If we need to fix it, we'll fix it. What's a VIP? So a VIP is a virtual IP. And so it's going to create basically a virtual IP address here that will get routed because it's outside of our regular network. So it'll be routed here and use it here. So basically you're creating a virtual interface to be used for the DNS block list. All right, that's good. That's it? That's all you need to do? Okay, awesome. So the DNS block list is kind of cool. But we're not done. That was just the initial setup. But look, now we have the right tabs. This is the stuff that I was expecting to see. So if we go to feeds, this is the part that I'm kind of excited about. Look at that. We can just add, it has support out of the box for a lot of open source intelligence feeds. So and also some that you pay for. In fact, I'm pretty sure, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that Mandiant is on here. Yeah, Mandiant's on here. So if you pay for Threat Intel, you can add their feeds here out of the box. I wonder if it has, I wonder what else it has support for. Look at this. It has Internet Storm Center. That's a cool one. Talos is good. Now, Alien Vault is what we're going to add. Did I enable the DNS block list in the wizard? Yes, I did. Oh, these feeds are already enabled. Look at this. Yeah, so there's support for snort as well. Oh, right. Prax had a question about or I think somebody said Firewalla, and what is the difference between this and Firewalla? Firewalla is kind of a blinky box, which I am religiously opposed to. If you're not familiar with Firewalla, think of it as like a pie hole that you pay for. A blinky box, meaning it's an appliance that you don't actually control the internals of the server. You buy the thing and it just does it, right? And I'm not about that. I embrace complexity. Now, there are some great products from Firewalla, and I know that some folks like John Strand really swear by them for certain use cases. And that's fine. But I also think that, Pi-hole is good. So that's the difference between what we're doing and Firewalla. Firewalla is meant to be a physical device that sits on your network and essentially becomes your DNS destination. Have I seen Sin's project using Teapot? Nope, I have not. All right, so it looks like we have some of these enabled, but I want Coin Blocker. What is is Coin Blocker seriously just a list of unauthorized use to mine cryptocurrencies? I love it. A specific feed just to block those. I do want to add Alien Vault though. Alias group PR1. So this is snort. I don't actually need the snort feed here. Oh, actually, yeah. Let's do it. Enable list. Yes. Deny both. That was easy. And now Alien Vault is added to the feeds feed section. Elk stack and several honeypots. Yeah, I'm not playing with honeypots yet. That's on the list, but we haven't gotten there yet. Binary defense, very cool. Binary defense is trusted sex SOC arm, if you're not familiar. And get Rapid 7 sonar. Very cool. So we have these lists that have already been added. That's fantastic. So we have our DNS block list enabled. Awesome. And the VIP here is the address should be in an isolated range that is not already used in the network. Rejected DNS requests will be forwarded to this VIP and changes to the... so we'll see the alerts here. Okay. And let's see. Prax had another question. Could we set that up to tie into a Pi hole, or is DNS block list different from that? So Prax, the DNS block list is essentially taking the role of Pi-hole in this case, because you'd be using this as the DNS resolver, which I don't think we have set up yet. Yeah, the unbound DNS resolver must be enabled, which we don't have. If we go to the interfaces, we go to isolation, because we're not using this as a DNS resolver. Yeah, if we go to services, DNS resolver. Right, we don't have DNS enabled here. Oh, my bad. Yeah, we do. Okay, so this is going to do some DNS resolving for us. But I don't think we're forwarding to it. I guess we could. Because right now, the way that, for example, our domain controller, which is our first DNS resolver, is set up is that it will forward to 8888. We could change it to forward to here. What's our DNS forwarder look like? Yeah. So in order to use the DNS block list, this has to be the DNS resolver. I want to start with this off. So Prax, again, your system's DNS resolver is disabled and piped to a Pi-hole. Right. Your Pi-hole, which for those of you who don't know what we're talking about, Pi-hole is a project for Raspberry Pi or other Linux servers, but it is essentially a DNS sinkhole that ingests block lists of known advertisers and things like that, and also allows customization. And then you put this on your network, it becomes your local DNS resolver. And then any machine on your network that uses this as its DNS resolver will have protection from ads, malicious sites, things like that through this service. So Prax, the use of this DNS block list is in lieu of Pi-hole. They are redundant. You can use one or the other. This is doing the same job that Pi-hole does. Portugal 9, thank you so much for the follow. So right now, even though this is enabled, we're not grabbing DNS traffic. Okay. Yeah, this thing can run cron jobs, so it'll update lists on whatever frequency you set. Let's go back to pfBlockerNG. Let's go to logs. I love that it has its own logging system. Nothing so far. Okay. All right, and we can see that the IPs are working. Hey, Wally Wonka, we are setting up. Yep, we're setting up a firewall to use automated block lists. So let's also consider this situation compared to like how you would do it with enterprise servers. So for example, or enterprise firewalls, like a Palo Alto, right? Now, Palo Alto has its own Intel feeds, right? And it has also malware analysis through Unit 42. So you get the advantage of that. But if you want to ingest custom feeds, how do you do that? You have to set up that connection, which is very similar to what we would want to do here. Now, because we're only using Alien Vault in OpenCTI, there's no reason for us to export out from OpenCTI to anything else, but we could. So if we want to feeds here, these are the predefined aliases and group feeds. This is IP6. This is the DNS. Ooh, can I enable the Alien Vault DNS block list? No, that's only snort for IPv4. So for the DNS block list, if I wanted to enable that, what do I have options for? Abuse URL house, that's a good one. Internet Storm Center, Great Wall. And then unknown user defined feeds. So I believe feeds user renamed. Feeds management page. Clicking the plus icon in the category will import all feeds in the alias group, while clicking the plus icon on the right will only import the individual feeds. Do not enable all feeds at once. Correct. And you don't have to, right? One of the things to know is that there's a lot of overlap between these different feeds. Because they're all sourcing essentially from some of the same top-level research. So you don't have to enable feeds from everywhere. What I would like to do is add my own, though, if possible. The more the safer you are, right up until you crash your firewall from trying to process all the data. Let's go to our, here we go. Enabling IPv4 filtering. IPv4. General IP, IPv4. Right, so if we go back here, firewall, IP, IPv4. Here we go. So you can see how we have a list of priority 1, priority 2. But if we wanted to add a custom list, finally, we wanted to add a custom list, how would we do it? Call this HISAC. That's the one that I use most often, to be honest with you. So what is ISAC? Information, I always forget what they stand for. Information Sharing and Analysis Center. And the H is the one for healthcare. There are others, though, depending on your industry. And what's cool about HISAC and others is that you can usually join if you're part of an organization in an industry. And what you get in most cases is threat intel feeds that you can hook into via API. And you're getting the advantage of not only often like paid subscriptions through that organization, which is in many cases a purchasing consortium. So for example, healthcare organizations or industrial power plants, things like that, will pool their resources and purchase threat intel feeds, and then everybody can take advantage of that threat intel feed by paying dues, right, as a member. And then you get that threat intel feed instead of paying for your own, which is kind of nice. But that thread intel feed will be an aggregated feed from multiple different sources. So that's like, if you do that, that's kind of like the one that you enable rather than having a trillion of them enabled, because that one is an aggregated feed. So if I wanted to do that, I could do HISAC here. And then the IP source definitions. Let's see, click here for guidelines. Set the format type. Auto default parser. Okay. Source. And then here we would do a URL if it's like a link to a static file, which it should be usually. Or if we have a local file on the system, which it almost never would be. So what we would do is we would set up our URL here. The field must be unique. So the header label here would be... So if I wanted to set up OpenCTI, how could I do it? Let's go back over to CTI, OpenCTI. I bet I have to log back in. Yep, that's okay. So one thing that you can do, I don't recommend doing this if you have built-in ingestions, but one thing you can do is you could ingest everything through your TIP, your cyber threat intel platform like we have here, and then use that as your source for your firewall block lists. You can do that. And yes, by the way, I just want to shout it out. I am going to specifically try to use the language of allow in block lists as opposed to other language. And it might seem like a stupid little thing, but it does matter. And it matters for the reasons that are laid out in Toni Morrison's work on Africanism, which you can read at your leisure. So if we go to connectors here, export file sticks to. So I can actually export these files to a specific location, right? If I wanted to. And connect that location. Internal export file, yeah. Connect that specifically to where our firewall goes. I want to see if I can make that happen. So to do that, let's go look up our OpenCTI. Documentation. Connectors. Oh, interesting. API interactions are they allow scripture program to interact. Okay, so connector launch manual activation. If you want to manually launch a connector, you just have to install Python 3 and pip3. And target service and launch the connector. I don't think I want to do that. Ash, thank you so much for the follow. The documentation is good, although there's quite a lot of it, and it's kind of split. So for example, the connectors themselves are listed separately here. I shouldn't have to do that. Do I have to be logged into Notion to make this happen? Fine. Still better than NIM documentation. They're trying. It's rough though. I'll admit that when I was learning NIM, that was a struggle for me. I love it when SSO sign-ins don't actually take you to the place you were trying to go in the first place. That's really fun. Okay, so we know that, oh, that's what I was thinking of. That OpenCTI has a Mandiant hook, which is kind of cool. I want stream consumers. Files import, files export. So let's look at this export file CSV. See if it has some documentation here. So you can see it takes a while to like click through. Interesting. So I don't want to get too bogged down in this, but the basic idea, and I may connect this at some point, is you can ingest feeds through OpenCTI and then represent them to your firewall via the API. I'll just look one more place for this. I wonder if it's via the API actually that you make this available. Because once it's ingested, like you don't, it's actually not the connector that you need. Events streaming. Data model. Please don't make me use the GraphQL API. Oh god. No. Oh, this is more than what I need. Yeah, so I would use the exporter to make that happen. I will not like it. I am sorry. I do not like GraphQL. I even understand why it's useful, and I still don't like it. Every time I've had to use GraphQL, and I've built applications that use it, every time it has just added so much complexity to what I'm doing. And I don't know, for me, for most things, it's like, well, your data model won't scale. It's like, I'm not going to be Netflix, right? I don't need it to scale to that level. I can use a Postgres database and call it a day. I prefer Neo4j for most NoSQL situations. That seems masochistic, Prax. Let's separate NoSQL from graph-based databases. Those two are not the same, right? If you have a graph-based database need, then what you have is primarily to track relationships, right, that are fairly complex, for example, like Bloodhound. But otherwise, if you do have a need for a NoSQL database, like Mongo exists. Document-based databases are fine just for specific use cases. And honestly, even then, Postgres has features. Did you know that Postgres has a JSON export option built in natively? You can just use that and have the same kind of, database reliability that you would expect from a proper DBMS. I don't know, like, this is one of my probably graybeardiest opinions, but most of the time, relational databases are the correct choice for people. Most of the time. The extra stuff is about people inventing stuff to invent new stuff, and it doesn't actually solve problems. Like, the problems that they're solving are misunderstandings about the original technology that they didn't want to use. That might be a bit of a hot take. But I truly believe that relational databases may continue to be the way that data is stored for humans, primarily for a reason. And by the way, if you wanna take that on as a challenge in terms of scale of data getting stored, pretty much every Excel spreadsheet is a relational database of one sort or another, right? And as we know, Excel is in fact the most prevalent database management system in use on the planet Earth. And in orbit, probably. Yeah. So, it can be extracted. Can either run. Manually launch the connector. You just have to install Python pip3. The connectors. I see. So this is to kick off the Python, the connector manually, but I don't actually want to do that. What I want to do is create an export for the settings. Accesses, right? Yes, and roles. Sure, I'll create a role. We'll do it this the right way. Roles. Oh, connector. And you can create a user per connector, which we kind of already have. All right, let's create an exporter user. No, not a role. A lot of DBMSs people are using nowadays are used for security through obscurity, trying to make OT harder for someone. JBeers, I guarantee you that the choice of database management system has nothing to do with security through obscurity. I guarantee you that was not part of the decision-making process. Somebody probably had a bug up their ass about what kind of cool technology they want to use, or they wanted to not, they saw like a white paper on a new tech that they wanted the dev to use. Yeah. Or like, yeah, what the dev wanted to use, or what the manager thought was the hot new thing. I promise you it was not for security through obscurity. Okay, we're gonna call this exporter. And then we got to change this up because it rolls. Oh, we got to hit the edit button. Sometimes material design is a little bit goofy. Hey, Karen. Perfect. Okay, so now that we have this, workflows. opinion, observe data, report. Can I make a new workflow? It's not really what I want to do. I want to just export the damn data. Ooh, a comment. Hmm. Create a connector, user, and attach role, which we've done. Now attach the role to the freshly created user. That's it. That's all we have here. Yeah. Okay. That doesn't actually help. Attention policies. Rules engine. This is cool. Look at this rules engine for attribution. This is basically a threat intel syllogism. Look at this. If A is attributed to entity B and B is attributed to entity C, then entity A is attributed to entity C. Classic syllogism. Cool. I'll turn that on, sure. That's fun. One of my favorite classes in college, which, by the way, I took no math classes in college because at the time I was like, I'm going to be a writer. And yeah, my favorite class, though, to fulfill my quantitative reasoning requirement was formal logic. And frankly, that was what honestly got me into the idea of programming in the first place, because I learned first the concepts of formal logic and enjoyed thinking in those ways, and learned that I could think logically without... What I discovered later was that my challenges with math were not conceptual but arithmetical, right? And then when I abstracted the in my head computation out to a machine that's much better at it than I am and could focus on the conceptual with math, I got a lot better at it. Exactly, if P then Q. In this case, the formal logic would be two premises, right? Which is A equals B and B equals C, and then the pass-through would be A equals C. Okay. But this is not what I want to do. This is data import. I want to go to data export. And I'm not going to waste too much more time on this because I want to pivot to doing Suricata as well. OCS with Redis that any platform can use. Take a look at the history connector. Tried to write modus ponens, figured the Twitch wasn't the best for notation. Yeah. Boy, I haven't thought about modus ponens and modus tollens in a minute. So there's a stream to Elastic, but that's not what we want. We want external export file. is not helpful. Where does it send it? Oh dear. 1, 2, 3. What up? Cubic algorithm complexity. A triple nested for loop. That's what you want to see. Yikes. Let's maybe get a little functools or something going on in there. You heard there are switch cases? There are no switch cases in Python. Yeah, that's actually a problem with Python. You have to do these conditionals if you want to do it like that. For that reason, I often will kind of short... This is totally off left field, but this is such a gross code structure, and it's something that Python forces you to do because it doesn't have a switch case, to your point, Killer. One of the things that I'll often do is the thing that I'm doing a conditional for, I will make a dictionary with the keys as, you know, potential things, and do a lookup for it first, and then whatever the contents are, like I'll map it there, and that way, including I can even map it to a function, right? I can map the key value to a function that I run, which is a little bit cleaner looking than this whole situation. Oh, get out of here with your white space complaints. GCasa, modern language should not depend on indentation. No, it was the traditional languages that didn't depend on indentation. And incidentally, it doesn't. There is a way to write Python with your curly braces and semicolons. It's just weird. You know, white space sensitivity is a choice. You don't have to like it. That's fine. But to dismiss an entire language based on one syntactical decision is, I think, a little sophomoric, to be honest. There's a lot of good in Python. Yes, I get indentation errors. Yes, they're frustrating. But every language has frustrating components of it. Okay. I'm going to leave the connectors thing alone, and we're going to pivot over to Suricata. Do I like Kotlin? I don't like Java for many reasons, so Kotlin's a better syntax, but I don't like running on the JVM. Okay, so Suricata, what are we doing? Suricata is an intrusion detection system. So what we'll be doing is setting up a server with a listener on the internal isolation network to listen for network traffic. So how does Suricata relate to Zeek? I can feel the question coming from Prax right now. How do these two play together? Zeek is looking at raw packet data. Suricata is too, kind of, but the way that they work is a little bit different. So Zeek is producing data about events, right? It's raw logging data that then we can ingest into the SIM, and we can generate alerts for it if we want. So it's like, why would you want both of these? Now, why would you use an IDS rather than just an IPS? Okay. Because these are two different services, and they perform two different tasks. And IPSs are only as good as the feeds that are coming into them, right? They're only as good as the feeds that are coming into them. They are a baseline. Security baselines are great to have. They'll catch the skids. They'll catch the unsophisticated attackers. It's important to have them. You must have them. They are necessary, but not sufficient. With Suricata, I can also generate, with much greater ease, custom rules about other kinds of activity that I may see. So, for example, Suricata also, I should add, is at the application layer. I can create rules, as you'll see in a moment. I can create rules about URLs. I can create rules about the contents of HTTP messages. I can even say that I can even use JA3 signatures or whatever. Suricata has so many options in terms of creating rules that I have a lot more flexibility. Now, that's all rule-based. And then, why would I want to have Suricata and Zeek running in the same environment? It might be redundant, but I don't think it is. And here's why. Suricata events, what are you going to get out of Suricata? You're going to get alerts on matches for rules. But with Zeek, you are getting the raw data about the connections in your environment, which means this is the move, okay, from traditional defense, cyber defense, to threat hunting. It takes a lot more data to do threat hunting. Why? Because you are looking for stuff that nothing else has caught yet. That is what threat hunting in its purest, truest form is. Okay? You are looking for evidence of attacks that have not yet been detected by your automated defenses. The whole point then is to find evidence, if there is evidence to be found, and then, circling back, adding detections so that they'll be caught in the future. You are running ahead of the automated defenses, looking for new things in your environment. So Zeek is using deep packet inspection. I mean, I don't think about it that way, Wally Wonka. It's a packet capture tool. It's doing deep packet inspection in the sense that it's reading packets, but it's not like a firewall that is like unwrapping packets. Okay, it is a straight up packet capture tool, and then a logging format that your SIM or whatever can ingest. Deep packet inspection is a term that you usually hear in conjunction with firewalls because they're bringing in the structured data and then unwrapping it, unencapsulating it, and inspecting it at those levels. Zeek is looking at the raw from the start. Zeek is collecting the data, but Suricata is the collection of published studies. Let's try this another way. This is the difference between looking at the logging from an EDR versus looking at the logging from Sysmon on an endpoint. An endpoint detection and response tool, what are the logs that you're going to see from that? Those are going to be alerts. Alerts on activity that the EDR thinks is suspicious. That is what you get. You don't get the raw feed, you get the curated feed of the stuff that the EDR thinks that you need to care about. That is Suricata. Suricata is going to give you the events that it thinks you need to care about based on its rule set. But Zeek is the raw feed of all the network data that it sees passing through your network. So it doesn't care whether there was an alert or not, it's going to tell you about it. Okay? Now, bringing it into Waza, there's another layer there where you can add some filtering for severity, but I am not doing that. I am bringing all of the Zeek logs into Waza so that I can see my network traffic and threat hunt on everything. So Suricata is good in identifying alert based on behavior, and Zeek would allow an analyst to validate that alert. Year zero, that's a really good way of putting it. Yeah. If I got an alert from Suricata, I could use the Zeek logs to correlate it and say, yes, that's exactly what happened based on the package structure that I see here. 100%. All right, let's get started though. Let's kick over to the documentation. The Suricata documentation, by the way, rules. Very happy with it. All right, let's go to our installation guide. I'm always wary of quick start guides because they often are like, this is what you want to do to make this happen. Although in this case, I may use the quick start guide. Will I be running Suricata on pfSense? No! Do not do that. First of all, I don't know if you can, but also don't do that. Separate your concerns a little bit. Packet capture is a pretty hefty compute process, so I'm spinning up my own server to do exactly that. Oh, is it a package available on pfSense? Shows what I know. No, look at that. Okay. I am not going to be running it there, and I'm not going to be running it there for a very specific, well, two specific reasons. Here's reason one. Reason one is I do not like putting all my eggs in one basket. I like having my defensive tools able to be a little bit more modular. I like my firewall to be my firewall, and I want my IDS to be my IDS. That might not be like everybody's way of doing this. Yes, it means I have to manage more assets, but I like separating them out, especially because I don't yet know what the performance impact is going to be on doing Suricata in my network, and that's certainly true in a real environment. So if I need to scale up my machine to handle the impact, I can do that without impacting the firewall, right? So in terms of impact to uptime, that's a big deal. So I like separating my concerns that way. That's part one. Part two is that I am treating the firewall like an appliance, meaning I don't want to do manual installation of packages on it too much, right? We're installing packages through its own package manager, but I'm not doing manual installation of packages. But I am going to be getting the Suricata logs into my SIM by way of Waza. So to do that, I need to have the Waza agent on whatever machine it is that I am running Suricata on. Consequently, I spun up a separate Linux server in order to do that. What would the high-level architecture of a setup like this look like? I can answer that question. Let's draw it out. That's worth taking a quick minute to do. I feel like I've made this thing okay. This is our basic network architecture. And let's add some things to it. So we've got the Ansible server, and we even have it's actually SockLab. This is our, think of this as our pfSense. Good job. Right? Because we have two different interfaces here. One is the isolation lab, one is the default. Okay? Hey, Lisso. Now, I have, in the default switch, I've got the Ansible server, which has a dual home and the isolation, and the Elk does as well, so it can connect data, or it can collect data from the Waza agents inside of the Windows environment. Okay? Get out of here. In addition, now, what we're talking about is, and pfSense is doing, you know, our IPS, right? But now I'm talking about adding Suricata. To this. Now, Suricata, incidentally, also needs to be dual homed, meaning that it has two network interfaces. That's why it's in this group here. So Suricata is going to have one network interface that's just a straight network interface. It's on the default switch, and it has internet access. That's the default switch. We should actually rename this to SecLab internal, because that's what we call it. it's a switch on the hypervisor, okay? But it's not a switch, and it has internet access. The isolation lab, though, and both of these have gateways coming through the pfSense router. However, the isolation lab does not, unless I choose to allow it, does not have internet access. And the reason I did that is because I want to be able to fire off malware in this network without worrying about it calling home unless I want it to. So for that reason, a lot of my infrastructure has to be dual homed, but I can shut down the internet access, or actually I can shut down any of these NICs as I need to, without impacting anything else. So that's basically what we're talking about here. And so Suricata is going to have an IP address that we use for management, okay? But it's also going to have an IP address that we use for, it's not going to have an IP address. It's going to have an interface that it uses for packet capture inside of the isolation lab environment, okay? And for that reason, we have the VM set up with 2 NICs. I hope that clarified the top level architecture here. Okay, let's go to our Suricata quick start guide. Okay, so we're going to use Ubuntu here. Ruza, thank you for the follow. We'll just add the PPA. And I can exit, or I can close this out. Okay, so we'll add the repository. And this is a brand new Ubuntu server. So your usage hasn't cracked 10% with Suricata pfSense for a few months, the CPU load. So that's good to know. I may move to using Suricata on the router if it's easy, but also, honestly, sometimes I do stuff as a teaching experience, right? And also learning experience for me. I didn't even know that Suricata was a package for pfSense. That's really cool. But I like learning how to set this stuff up from scratch so that when, not if, when something goes wrong, I have a reasonable understanding of where to look. But that's me kind of just being an old school sysadmin. I have some tendencies I'll fully own that are not the most practical. I prefer to do deep dives onto systems because I want to understand how they work in a deep way. That's what's up here. Adalismar, or however you pronounce that. Thank you very much. Suricata on pfSense. Oh, right, exactly. So has you wondering how to have the alerts go to Elk. Exactly right. I totally forgot about that part. I don't know if you can do a Waza agent. Just save that out, but yeah, so Waza is pulling, as we'll see, the Suricata logs, and it'll pull it into Elastic. Well, Waza versus Beats. So with Waza, yeah, I'm adding that. With Waza, you don't have to have separate beats for every file you're pulling. You can have the agent one time get configured to pull multiple different files. I think it's a much nicer way of doing it, and I like the configuration for Waza a lot more. Right, deploy new agent. This was my question. Yeah, so unfortunately, if there was a BSD right here, then we could put that on the router and call it a day. But there is no BSD package for Waza. Consequently, we have to, if we want to get Suricata data with Waza, we have to do it another way. And that's what we're doing. So back to our quick start guide. Right. So we're going to do sudo apt update and sudo apt install y, Suricata, and JQ, because of course we are. That. Fine. I think Waza, which is OSSec, can act like an HBSS agent, react to rules like file integrity monitoring. I think it can, yes. And one thing we haven't played with yet, but I do want to eventually, is look into Aurora, which is Florian Roth's latest thing, which is rather than using Sysmon or whatever, it has its own set of rules that are Sigma rules, basically. And it will produce alerting based on that. It does use event tracing for Windows, just like Sysmon, but rather than looking at everything, the what gets filtered by Sigma rules is already present on the endpoint. So it's a little bit more efficient, I think. But it's very alerting based, right? Rather than threat hunting based. You may miss things that bypass the Sigma rules. Fluxus, you tried Aurora? What did you think? Okay, sudo Suricata. Looks like it's build info. Looks good. Okay. And we know that we want this thing to run on ENS 1.9, which is our isolation network. So we'll sudo vim etc suricata suricata.yaml. That looks good. And then what are we doing? AF packet section needs to match. So we got to go to AF packet. Awesome. Okay, so we're going to change this to ENS 1.9. Perfect. We'll do sudo Suricata update. Suricata-update is its own command. Love it. So Suricata has its own rules. And then we'll restart the Suricata service. And look, this is right here. This is what it pulls from. Okay. And so, sudo systemctl restart Suricata. Okay. And then sudo systemctl. I like to do a status after this just because. Okay, it's up and running. Love it. And then sudo tail var log suricata suricata.log. Not swad, sudo. Interface ENS 1.9 is down. Oh. Oh, okay. So we have to bring it up. I'm hoping that just means I can... So I thought that I would have to not configure it with NetPlan. But I can fix that with... let's see, plan. Yeah. So let's just bring it up. Happy Nightmare says, I understand very little of what's being said here, but you should learn a bit more since you'll be finishing your degree in cognitive science soon. Cognitive science, cool. I am curious how cognitive science relates to what we're doing here, unless cognitive science was a typo and you meant computer science. Also, some talk about the SOC analyst stuff. Listen, SOC analysts at the beginning are not doing any of this. They're responding to the alerts generated by this tooling. But I want to show how to build this out, not only so that you understand what's under the hood, but also my secret dream is that we stop paying enterprise subscriptions for so much stuff that you can do for free. I truly believe that security money is better spent on people than services. I want people with training and talent, and I want organizations to bring people on with the ability to learn and the interest to learn and train them. I want that to be the investment rather than constantly paying for vendor services. I know that that's an old school way of doing it. I know that that's not as efficient. But I think that is a better long-term sustainable way to do it. I think over time you will find that you spend less money in turnover and certainly in vendor subscriptions than if you do it otherwise. And I'll just add that if you do this right and you invest in your team, your security team will blow everyone else out of the water because they will have understanding that nobody else will have. All right, we got to change up this address. This ain't right. We're going to do 10.1.99.7. And the name servers 10.1.99.3 is our domain controller. None of this should matter for this interface because it's going to get hijacked by Suricata anyway. But nevertheless, sudo netplan apply. Okay. And then let me just make sure that that is updated in our inventory. Uh-oh. Can't use .7. I got to use .9. .7 was already taken. That's why we maintain a database or an inventory of your statics. Okay, sudo systemctl restart Suricata. Happy Nightmares is curious about hacker culture and security. You do know something about the anthropology of hackers. Hey, the Senpai, that question is interesting, although not quite what we're doing right now, so I'm going to ask you to join our Discord. And I did that the second that Nightbot was doing it anyway. But join our Discord. There will definitely be folks who are willing to help you out and answer questions. Can Excel be a database? Yes. Should Excel be a database? No. Yannervite, I think the hacker culture, at least from the security conference, has changed much over the last 20 years. It's nice. If you want to see a component of hacker culture that hasn't changed that much, go to HOPE, Hackers on Planet Earth, the New York conference. It's happening in Queens this year in the summer. If you want to see like a very, sometimes pretty rough around the edges part of hacker culture, do that. Oreo Byte has redeemed Play a Song, and I Shall Comply. Okay, let's get Droid Cam up. And let's mute our music for the moment.
Testing 1 2. How's everything sounding? I made some changes to the audio, so I just want to make sure the mix is okay. Awesome. All right. Let's do just a nice, gentle song for an easy Saturday morning. This is called Thomas County Law. Thomas County law's got a crooked tooth. Every traffic light is red when it tells the truth. The church bell isn't kidding when it cries for you. Nobody looks away when the sun goes down. Thomas County Road takes you where it will. Someone's singing on the far side of other hills. And there's nowhere left to bury all the time I've killed. Nobody looks away when the sun goes down. There's a couple ways to cross Thomas County line. You can't see beyond the trees, they're too tall and wide. And I never seem to see around my brother's wife. Nobody looks away when the sun goes down. There are castles for kings, there are birds without wings. I could whine about it all, but I won't. Thomas County law's got a crooked tooth. Ain't a mother with a heart less than black and blue. When they hold them to the light, you can see right through. Every dreamer falls asleep in their dancing shoes. I may say I don't belong here, but I know I do. Oh, nobody looks away when the sun goes down. Nobody looks away when the sun goes down.
And we're back. Oh, I'm glad that you and your son enjoyed that, Prax. Thank you. All right. So let's see. How is Suricata doing now? That's better. Now, how are we going to get the data? So this var log Suricata log, right? This is the stats. So we're going to curl we'll have to do it from another machine, though. Let's do it from a machine that's internal. So we'll go to our workstation. Oh, thank you, OreoBite. I hope that was worth your 10,000 cybers. That's upsetting. Why does it say that? Testmynids.org. That just doesn't sound right. Okay. It's why did I lose? I hate it when this happens. There we go. Close KRDC here. I lost the full screen control there. But then we do so fast.log. Nothing there, but that's probably because it was going through the other interface. So let's go back to Starbase and turn the workstation, disable its right, so this is the one that we want to disable. Disconnect. Okay. And then let's get back here. Reconnect to 10.99.100. And then we'll do custom resolution of 1440 by 900. Because I don't feel like dealing with the full screen weirdness again. Not seeing it there, but I wonder. Okay, we are seeing data come in. Now, I believe this is because we have shut this down on the firewall side. This is actually good news. Now, if we wanted to, we could add another detector on the internet side. So let's actually switch that up. Let's re-enable this. If we wanted to see Suricata running on the internal network. Yeah, good. Turn that back on. Let's we have to add an interface to this, right? Because I still want my actual interface set up for packet capture. So we'll add a network device. Here. Good. We'll add that. Okay. And then we do IPS. You'll see that now we have an ENS20 that isn't doing anything. So what we'll do is we'll give this another IP address, and this one we'll just set to DHCP true because it doesn't matter what it is. So we'll do sudo vim etc netplan. Okay. And we're gonna do, just gonna copy this much. Yank that. And paste that. And then 20 DHCP true. Okay, sudo netplan apply. Now you can see we've got a new IP address on the internal network, and then we'll do sudo vim etc suricata.yaml interface. Can I do more than one? It looks like I can. And we'll do a cluster ID of 98. Cluster type, cluster flow, defrag, yes. Okay. In fact, let's do some Vim stuff to make this easy. So what we'll do is we'll take all this cluster stuff, right? Well, and we'll take all the comments with us. All the way down here. We'll yank it. We'll go down to interface ENS120. We pasted it, and now we're going to use visual mode to select that zone. And then we're going to run global if it has a hashtag in it, we delete it. So that was a quick way of just deleting all the comments in there. So Happy Nightmares is asking what's the difference between a red team or blue teamer. So Nightmares, you're not wrong that red team was in the service of defense by imagining what an adversary might do, but their job is to emulate the attacker, right? They are actually performing offensive operations against an environment, whereas the blue team is designing and maintaining the defensive architecture. They are responding to alerts, they are looking for threats in the environment, and when something does go wrong, it is the blue team that responds to the incident, whether by trying to remediate the issue or performing forensic investigations as an after action sort of thing. Okay, so we got to change this cluster ID to 98. Okay, let's restart Suricata. So then they often work together, not as much as I'd like. So generally speaking, the blue team is internal to an organization or they work for a managed security service provider. And they would contract with companies to perform pen tests. Well, no. Don't jump to purple team, friends. When an organization contracts to do a pen test, a penetration test, they are working with the red team. Purple team is a different concept where the integration between the offensive and defensive operations is not, it's much more tightly woven, and importantly, I think, is that the integration is a longer process of constantly trying to emulate new threats and then using that to harden defenses. It's an iterative process. So purple teaming is not the only way in which red teams and blue teams can interact, but it is the kind of richest way that they can interact. All right, let's check our status of Suricata here. Okay, up and running. Let's go ahead and try test my NIDS again. In fact, I can do it from here because now I'm theoretically tracking on Okay. I don't know why that didn't work before. Okay. Definitely working. Fast.log is not showing it though. That's interesting. Okay. So we're not going anywhere yet. Yeah, Security Onion's cool. It didn't meet my needs for this, but I know that the Guar in particular really likes Security Onion. Has had a lot of... Wait a second. The cluster, minimally the cluster ID should be unique, so I did get that right. Threads 18. How many threads are we using? Threads auto. And let's see, how is this configured now? We're definitely seeing traffic, which is good news. Still nothing in the log, though. Suricata, what's up? Let's look at the rules. And let's actually vim the HTTP events.rules alert. So it's pretty long. Compression bomb. Fun. HTTP request field missing colon. See if it does something like that. You can also do, let's see, DNS events. If we do weird DNS requests, that's interesting. Am I doing this wrong? Should I do... Because actually, I don't know how fast log works. Is it like momentary? All 4 packet processing threads formatted with threads initialized. Engine started. Yeah, nope, not happening. Let's try it from the jump box. Nothing there. Come on. Cluster type, cluster type for I guess. Use it. Yeah. Let's look at everything we have going on here. Adding interface ETH0. Well, that's not right. There we go. Adding interface ENS19. Default server. Here we go. Default is request body. Ooh. Is this a thing that I need to do with the network interfaces? Nope. Because these should be, I mean, we know that Z can do promiscuous mode here, so should be okay. Did I get the Packer template working? No. I did not. And I'm pretty sure that the issue has to do with drivers for the disk. It couldn't write to the disk was the problem. You can add those drivers in auto unattend. Yeah, I saw that. I just, again, I will eventually get there, VTCN, but it's not my primary concern right now. Right now, my primary concern is the fact that I'm seeing protocol detection and parser disabled. Do we have? The more advanced output is the EVE-JSON output, which is explained in EVE-JSON. To see what it looks like. So what we really want is to look at the eve.json file. Is there a 1 anywhere in this? Yes. Okay, there is data. Nothing there. I actually do want to see this. So it's capturing packets. Not like a lot, though. Ugh. This is not as helpful as I was hoping. Suricata, hyperscan. So that's the error we saw a couple times. What is hyperscan? It's a high performance regex library. Okay, it doesn't seem like we need it. Seems like it's optional. Let's sudo vim, let's see, Suricata YAML. Let's see if there's anything else in here that we need to worry about. Outputs, file, syslog. Actually, I want to enable one of these, which is I want to enable HTTP log. Hey, Z-Creed, Sand Surfing Shark, and Happy Nightmares, thank you for the follows. So I want to enable HTTP log here. Okay. And I also want to do DNS. Happy Nightmares. What kind of things have them? Drivers. So drivers, Happy Nightmares are pieces of software that mediate the interaction between hardware and the operating system. Okay. So any device, disk drives, keyboards, USB controllers, cameras, that interact with the operating system will require a driver. And often, virtual devices will require drivers as well. Okay. What is OpenCTI all about? So OpenCTI, which we're not doing right now, but OpenCTI is about ingesting open source threat intelligence feeds. You can do proprietary threat intelligence feeds, but it's about aggregating them into a single dashboard for analysts to use. So for example, you can read reports from multiple sources in one place to understand what the threat profile looks like, look at observables to see what kind of things you'd be looking for, right? URLs, files, things like that. There's also relationships between things, including tactics, techniques, and procedures. Would CPU have one? Yes. Well, that's a little bit trickier. What CPUs have is something known as firmware. Or motherboards do. Is there a part that doesn't because it actually has or is the OS? So the OS is software, Happy Nightmares. So any hardware, right? But the motherboard has to have drivers. The motherboard does, and then the CPU is handled a little bit differently. Yeah. Motherboard components can have drivers. We're off the beaten path here. So I'm using 2 AF packets threads for interface ENS120. All FP. This looks good. 2 cores, so using 2 threads. Look at this. We're getting a lot more data now. Still nothing in fast. So here we are. Packets 34. We're still not seeing alerts coming in. Despite absolutely, theoretically capturing on these things. So why don't we try this with a custom rule to confirm that we're doing this? So to do that, let's go back over to Suricata. Documentation. Okay. And let's go to Suricata rules. Suricata rules have a pretty interesting format here. Just go to the basic syntax. If you haven't seen these, I've actually done a stream on Suricata rules with Range Force. But this is kind of how it goes. There's an action, which is drop, or whatever. We want alert in most cases. Drop packet and generate alert. Drop only works if we're doing inline mode, right? We're not doing this as a firewall, so... And then after that comes the source and destination. Now these are described as home nets. And then the protocol. Then you have options for what happens, like the message. What the content would be. And there are, if you don't want to mess with manual syntax, there are indeed Suricata rule generators. That's snort. I know I've seen one of these before. Oh, Snorpy does do Suricata. Okay, I'm not crazy. Wow. Well, that's something I can't unsee. What? Why? Come on. Thank you. Okay. We're going to do alert. TCP. Source IB is going to be home net. Source port is any. Dest IP is... we're going to alert for visits to my website. Okay. TCP state established. Direction to server. And we're going to add that to our rules here. And if we look at our documentation for rules, adding your own rules. We can do local.rules. And we add the local rules. So we're going to we're just going to make a local.rules. We're going to paste in the one that we just made. Notice that Vim picks up the syntax. And then sudo vim etc suricata. Suricata YAML. What do I want? I want rule files. Good. And then we'll add home seclab local.rules. And then let's systemctl daemon reload, and restart Suricata. And now I'm really hoping that if I visit my website, not picking it up. So, okay, so the question is, set TS to disable promiscuous mode. Nope. This should be catching packets. What have we done wrong here? Is there another rule active overriding your local rule? There shouldn't be, and there certainly shouldn't have been one for the default. All right, obvious. So Eve is showing that we're getting data. Look at this. Source IP 10.1.99.102. Dest IP 224. This is UDP. This is stats. So the error are flows. We're seeing it. So we're seeing DNS, and it's picking it up as DNS. So traffic is getting identified. This is good. 192.168.99.117. 99.7, 99.7, 99.100. UDP. So we're seeing traffic here. Is the rule bound to the correct interface? I don't think rules are interface based. It's about HomeNet, and HomeNet is defined correctly. DNS. All right, we're gonna try one more thing. We're gonna see if we saw the flow. Dest IP equals 104.248.74.19. Interesting. So it's not seeing the dest IP. Equals flow. Source IP. Dest IP. What if you ping the IP directly, not the domain name? The rule set to catch dest IP, right? Not the DNS. Yeah, but it has to... That's not how networking works. The DNS resolution returns an IP address, which is what the network interface actually communicates with. So that's what, like, even when I do the curl, the TCP connection is established with an IP address. It gets the DNS name from the DNS request first, and then uses the IP address. So that's I don't think the issue. I'm wondering if HomeNet is HomeNet 192.168 fine /16 10.0.0.8 172.168. So these HomeNets match what we have for HomeNets. And the external net, right? Fine. HTTP servers. HomeNet. Fine. HTTP ports 80. Change that up actually. And then vim local.rules. alert TCP homenet any to 443. Just establish priority 1. That looks okay. Sudo vim. Suricata. No errors. Ah, the fun part. Loading rule file. 2 rule files processed. 26036 rules successfully loaded. 0 rules failed. The rule worked. Am I getting null? If the DNS request went through the filter and is resolved, I assume you mean, later you won't see anything, right? Yes, I will. Because the response has to come back. Watch. If I ping c4 tech.com, you'll see that it's resolved. I've got a weird routing thing going on, actually. That I gotta remove. Okay. Now, notice that it resolved the IP address, even from the ping. What happens when I give this thing a domain name is that it makes the DNS request, gets the IP address back, and uses that. You can set the rules for inbound and outbound traffic, except for outbound, it won't catch the answer. The way we've set this up, this it's established to server. Maybe do from client to server and from client. I feel like are the same thing, but whatever. The thing is, we weren't getting the first one. You know what I mean? Like, something's up with the rules here, because we go back to our quick start. Like, GPL attack response. All right, let's look for that rule in our rules here. Or that string in our... We don't have the rule. All right, so that's part 1. No, the rule won't be... the answer will be ignored if the request went through that alert. I don't think that's how that works. I've set it up to alert on traffic to this destination. And the net flow that we're looking at is to the server. But we have another problem. We have like several problems here. This looks very unintuitive managed. Yeah, it is. This is why you pay for people to do it. Wait. The signature with ID 2100498 from the ET Open rule set. Is this not here? Hold on a second, though. Why? Suricata uses signatures to trigger alerts, so it's necessary to install those and keep them updated. Signatures are also rules. That's the rule files. The Suricata object rules can be fetched. In this guy, we run the default mode, which fetches the ET Open rule set. Yeah, in theory, except we didn't actually get them. Because we didn't see this rule anywhere. That's crazy. There are web UIs you can get for Suricata. But the whole point is that this thing, once it's set up, should be, yeah, IDS tower. Yeah, free download, I bet. But this is also why Security Onion, right? Because with Security Onion, you just kind of like have everything out of the box, set it and forget it. Okay, so that rule wasn't there. Now it is. And let's just take a look at this rule. So IP any, going to any, and it's searching for SID. So it has a SID. We have 7. Updated. Okay. Let's get rid of the flow on mine, actually. Because it looks like... and then I want to see what it says about rule reloads. Rule reloads. Suricata will continue. Suricata SC reload rules. Suricata SC will set reload not blocking. Okay. Sudo Suricata SC. Good. Let's do reload rules. Oh, God. When using the Unix Sonic socket, which we're not. Okay, whatever. We're just going to systemctl restart it. You can import pre-builds, set geo, pay, get some more up-to-date rules. So here's the thing. This stuff is easy to do if you understand it, right? The problem is that you don't understand it at first, and so you have to have this kind of process of like learning how it all works. And unfortunately, the official documentation always makes some assumptions about your understanding of how things work. Okay, so how do you fill in the gaps? I'm filling in the gaps. I am going through this so you don't have to. You can learn from my suffering and figure out how to do this the easier way, or know how to do it the right way the first time. Okay, so we restarted that. Let's nope. Sudo vim var log suricata suricata.log. Go to the end here. One rule failed. Oh, that's very funny. The rule for the GPL attack response rule failed. ID check returned. No. Duplicate signature. Wait, it existed elsewhere? Were we looking in the wrong place for rules? Ah! Var lib suricata rules. That's interesting. Yup. There they are. Still nothing. Now, is this because I need metadata? No, because it processed the rule. So any TCP connection here should go. All right, I want to see. Because JQ is a little bit funny. There we go. We've seen a lot of DNS. Okay, so we're getting the dest IPs that we see here. What's everything we see? We see only DNS. We're only seeing DNS. Right? That's interesting. Those are flows, though. Huh. All right. It's getting a little bit late, so what I'm gonna do... Stupid question. Is the rule marked to be used? I know it from Snort. You have hundreds of rules and only active ones will be used. Custom ones you create, you have to activate first. Nope. If you add it into the rules file and you ingest it, if you list it in the rules file, they're active. There's no flag for that. If it's there, it's used. But yeah, I think we're going to call it there for today. It's been a long stream, and we're getting close. I will fix this next week. But for now, let's see if there's anybody else streaming right now that we can send folks to. All right, we're going to raid somebody new here, Purple Bite 1. So that's going to do it for today, friends. Thank you so much for hanging out. I hope you learned something. I know I did, even though we didn't get fully set up. We're well on our way. And so we'll get that sorted next time. And I'll be back on Tuesday, though, doing red team stuff. And Wednesday, we're doing programming, of course. Until then, be good to yourselves, be good to each other, and happy hacking, everybody. We'll see ya.